Welcome to DevOps Dispatch Live at KubeCon North America, Chicago 2023. My name is Laura Santamaria, and I am a lead developer advocate here at Dell. And with me is one of my co-hosts.
Hello, my name is Kat Cosgrove, and I am also a lead developer advocate here at Dell.
And we also have a wonderful guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, listeners. My name is Paris Pittman. I work at Apple in the Open Source Programs Office.
Woo, 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 woo. We're very excited to have you on.
Yay! I'm so excited to be here.
I know.
I've watched you two grow in the Kubernetes community, and I'm so excited to talk about it.
Yay!
Yay!
Yeah, so we all kind of, I don't know about you two, but I know I've met Paris, you during the open source community, kind of getting involved with Kubernetes. I started out in SIG contributor experience. Is that how you also met Paris, Kat?
No, I met Paris through like a Kubernetes adjacent community.
Okay, so kind of open source.
Yeah,
kind of open
still
source.
open source. It was just it's a Kubernetes group of people,
Yes.
but where it's not directly in the project.
But I kind of think that Paris, I think you kind of brought both of us in some way, shape, or form, right?
No. You brought yourselves in. And no, it's been really great because one of the things that I like to do when shepherding open source projects is make sure that we have opportunities for others. And I think it's very clear with Kubernetes that we've made a lot of that space. A lot of people say 80,000 people, like 80,000 contributors.
It's a lot.
And it is a lot. And honestly, it's been a lot on our maintainers. I think that's kind of one of the trade-offs that you have with open source is growing contributor bases and potentially bringing out maintainers. But I think one of the things that we've done really well in Kubernetes is make a lot of roles and organizational design. And Kat, you've had a lot of experience with that on the release team. And again, I love seeing you lead, and it's been really great.
Thank you. Yeah, for the listeners, I'm a longtime member of SIG Release. I'm currently leading the Docs sub-team, but I've also led comms, and I've been a release lead shadow a couple of times as well. A lot of roles, even like just within the process of getting a Kubernetes release out the door, and that's just SIG Release. That doesn't include release engineering, which is the other half of that you don't really see very often. It's also full of its own roles.
Yeah, and the release team is really beautiful because the roles have role books and process documents.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that really gives people the capability to jump in. And then you mentioned also the shadow program. Mentoring contributors is very hard. And
It is.
When you come into roles and have shadow programs, that definitely takes a lot of burden off of a maintainer to do that one-on-one mentoring.
Yeah.
Anytime I give advice to maintainers who come to me and say, Paris, I can't do mentoring. I just don't have the time. I usually say, well, just write down the stuff that you do, process docket, and create a handbook and actually recruit just like you would at your job. I mean, it's so similar. I mean, the incentives obviously are different.
Sure.
But it's so similar to recruiting at your job. Like you have a scoped thing that you need to do. And it's overwhelming, I think, for maintainers to really kind of think in that when they're already overwhelmed.
Right.
It's a lot of work. And the shadow program does make that much easier, by the way. You just have to consider every time when you're selecting your shadows that ultimately what you're doing is training somebody to replace you.
Exactly.
Like you have to leave at some point.
Yes.
I realize that's rich coming from me, a person who's just kind of like sat languishing in SIG Release for the last like 2.5 years. But
it's not. No, you've been moving up the ladder. Like
Yes.
you've been doing the things that you're supposed to do. You've been shadowing others, training others. And eventually you're going to say bye too.
Yeah,
and it
I
doesn't
will.
even need to say bye. Maybe you could go to another SIG and whatever. I mean, eventually I did say bye myself.
Yeah, you did.
I did. I felt like I was kind of in everything at one moment, and slowly, and I kind of feel like using the word responsibly peeled myself out of it.
Yeah.
Meaning, didn't leave up in flames. I made sure that things were covered, made sure to grow people in those roles. But I knew at that time, after so many years, that it's so important for me, if we want to continue grow, to let it go.
Yeah.
That's something that I also say a lot to maintainers, because when we create something, I mean, it's art at the end of the day. But when we create something, sometimes you have to let it go in order to grow yourself or the thing. So that's where that's where I think maintainers really should pay attention.
So how do we make maintainers feel more comfortable stepping down?
Ooh.
There we go.
I think that is a good $1 million open source question.
Doesn't even have to be comfortable for them.
No,
Also true.
Yes, that's actually, honestly, it wasn't comfortable for me, y'all. I mean, it's still not. Like, I still linger. And, I try not to be that person that is going to knit on dumb stuff that I used to.
You want to come shadow on the release team?
Honestly,
You haven't done it.
Kat.
I mean, honestly, no. I swear to you, the other day at work, I said, you know what? I've never done in Kubernetes. I've never shadowed the release team and never grown into a release role. So I was like, maybe I'll shadow the comms team.
Yeah, come shadow comms.
But I mean, this actually illustrates something, is that goodbye isn't necessarily goodbye forever.
No.
It's understanding that we have to make space for other people in these communities. We have to allow other people to grow into them. And then sometimes it means then we come back rejuvenated and ready to do a little more or take on a different role somewhere in the community in general. I was going to say, though, we keep using contributor and maintainer. And I wonder if some people listening to this podcast know the difference between a contributor and a maintainer. So Paris, how would you define that?
Definitely fully loaded terms, depending on the project.
Right.
So I'm going to give you that lead developer. It depends on everything. Right. In Kubernetes, I can be very specific and say that contributor is pretty much any GitHub event.
Yeah.
So that would be commenting on an issue or a PR, reviewing a pull request, creating a pull request. Participating in any way. And the cool thing about Kubernetes too is for a lot of our non-code contributors, they still get counted in that because we still have to do process docs. I mean, again, this is where I boil down to, making room for others.
Right.
And then inadvertently, you're actually getting credit for non-code.
Right.
It contributes to your dev stats.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I'm a perfect example. Like I spent 5 years on the project and did nothing but non-code.
Right.
I mean, I'd like to argue that YAML and HTML and Markdown are code, but we'll save that for a different podcast.
There we go.
I definitely have a little issue with the non-code thing. I feel like if I'm pushing to Git, we're all technical here. We're all technical.
Absolutely.
So what's a maintainer mean in the Kubernetes project? I know the answer to that, but the listeners don't.
The GitHub event for contributors, and then maintainer, we actually don't use that word. I use the word maintainer outside of the Kubernetes project because it is more widely accepted.
Right.
But we do code owners and code owners all the way up. So that would be reviewers, approvers, and then these things called sub-project owners. And then so those are people like in root directories and root files.
Yeah.
So
there used to be a maintainer.
Right. And then to me personally, I feel like if you are a reviewer all the way up to a sub-project owner, I consider you a maintainer. You are there to really look after the project at that point. Once you're reviewing things, that's saying, hey, I'm reviewing this for accuracy, quality, and, all the other things. And that's, really looking after the project, that's shepherding the project.
There we go. Okay. So we have, if you're doing anything I'm trying to look for a different word than contribute. Help. There we go. That's probably I'm looking for the $1 million word. That was the proper word for it.
Anything trackable to help.
Yeah. And anything that you're doing to help the project is a contributor. And then maintaining is literally I'm going to care for this in some way, shape, or form. So that makes sense. And so then you're saying there's roles that are really, really good for an open source community to create
100%,
for all of those maintainers to be able to define the boundaries around what their brain can handle, basically.
And it makes it so much easier, like I said, for mentoring, for training, for growth. Something I hear all the time in the open source community that I do appreciate now that I've been in for quite some time, but you hear just jump in and help.
That's helpful.
That's not helpful. That's not helpful.
Because it's overwhelming.
It's so overwhelming, you all. And you hear that a lot from maintainers. And like I said, I've actually said it myself when I've been in that state of mind where you're like 1,000 PRs deep in the queue and thousands of issues. And it's like, I don't just jump in, like whatever you want to do. And, but I do think that like if other maintainers hear that kind of, phrasing from other maintainers, I think from a mutual aid perspective, I think we all have the, the capability to jump in. And I don't see that a lot either. So something that I preach a lot lately is like mutual aid for open source.
Makes sense.
And thinking about each other and thinking about helping each other and ways to help us not feel so burdened and burnt out.
Right. Because that's really the big problem right now is so many maintainers are starting to get burnt out because they haven't been able to get new people in. They haven't been able to get new blood in.
We aren't seeing as much investment in open source from companies being willing to like hire employees that they literally pay to contribute to open source. Not kind of losing that a little bit lately. Like fortunately, Dell does pay me to do that.
Thank you, Dell.
Thank you, Dell. That is explicitly part of my job, so that rules. But I'm lucky, and that's not normal, right? A lot of these overworked maintainers are doing this in their spare time after work, and that kind of sucks. That's not really
I mean, especially
scalable.
Our older infrastructure.
I
think a lot of the new stuff coming out is I think like maybe new strategies and mindsets for companies. I mean, of course, you hear things like open core and stuff like that. So I think today in 2023, there is a little bit more a new approach, but I do worry about some of this older infrastructure. Thankfully, orgs like OpenSSF and others are kind of looking after this and trying to come up with some real world problems real world solutions
to all of these problems.
I know. They are all problems. So.
Yeah, but I mean, no, it's good. It's definitely good. I think one of the big things along with all this, and I know we've talked about this before, is the acknowledgements for all of these contributors, all of these people who are helping maintain. So sorry, I just did that again. Contributors and maintainers both getting acknowledged for the work that they're doing. And the roles really help with that, really, right?
Yeah, for sure.
In general.
Yeah.
So you're able to help drive that as part of the discussion.
Yeah, but I mean, like we said, if like you are a couple years in your project already and knee deep in tech debt and whatever, it's really hard to build roles at that point. Like really hard. So that's why when I created tech contributor strategy in CNCF, that was one of the kind of like the main goals is to get these projects early. Get them, get them at the sandbox and incubation level. How can we shepherd them now? Instead of when we get to this graduated standpoint and things are rolling in production and then we've got major community issues in some aspect. Right. I really think, I mean, this is my personal experience take here. I really think that at the CNCF level, we should have a graduation requirement that says that the maintainers have thought about a community strategy. And the strategy just could be a README. It could be a souped up governance doc with the roles. It could be, I don't know, so many other things. But it needs to be thought about and discussed because when we're at graduation levels and, 2 to 5 years down the road, I think maintainers don't necessarily want to moderate their mailing lists anymore. And they don't want to do their GitHub management anymore. I mean, eventually, you want to grow as a person. And again, all of those things could have been roles or thought about at some other point and had a better strategy in play. So that's not to talk bad about maintainers that don't have that now. And that's why I just want to get it early so that we don't have that kind of pain when trying to implement at, a troubled state.
It can be a lot to unravel all at once.
Yeah. And I mean, also, I guess as part of that community strategy is the succession plan. How 100%. Do people move?
Yeah, 100%.
As I hit my mic. The things that happen live.
We're professionals.
We're very
We'll
professional.
Fix it in post.
It'll be fine.
I do kind of like this mic, so
they're really nice.
Yeah, they make everybody sound like they've got radio voices.
Oh, I know. I've never actually listened to my voice before and liked it.
It's much nicer, isn't it?
We'll have to get you one.
I know.
There we go. So we are getting close to time. So I always want to give any of our guests a chance to kind of like plug. What's the cool things that you're working on? What's like the next thing that you're seeing? this is your time. Tell us what's going on for you and what's going on just in general for what you're focusing on.
Let's think about that because there's so much going on in open source.
Woo, woo.
I think the main driving thing right now that I'm super excited about is Swift on Server.
Okay.
I have recently been asked to join the Swift core team.
Ooh, fancy. Congratulations.
Thank you. And that's kind of like the equivalent, I would say, to the Kubernetes steering committee with a little bit of TOC.
Oh boy.
The cool thing again, like about open source is that every project has this like different organizational design and different types of groups and how they get work done and stuff like that. So one of the cool things that we're doing in Swift is we are creating 2 more groups. One of those groups is called the Ecosystem Steering Group.
Okay.
The other group is called the Platform Steering Group.
Gotcha.
And we did a blog recently about the intentions of that and some of the different kind of organizational design stuff and changes that we put in place so that we can welcome new contributors. But we're really trying to grow the ecosystem for Swift on Server and trying to help out the cross-platform story and get some different use cases. We know that there's a lot of very ugly C++ code bases out there.
Oh boy.
And I've seen Swift do some really cool stuff. And especially in that space.
Yeah.
Right. I know. And a lot of people don't know that. And there's github.com/Swift server.
Okay.
And would love to have people join us and participate, just like a community. If folks out there are listening and want to get in on something super greenfield and exciting, call me.
Nice.
Just kidding. Don't necessarily call me. Don't necessarily call me, but we will have a blog about how to get involved in those 2 groups on swift.org.
Yeah.
There's also forums.swift.org. You can turn that into a mailing list.
Oh boy.
That's how I use it. I know the Cloud Native community is all about the mailing list.
I'm very pro mailing list personally.
Same with
At
the
this
Apache
point,
Software Community Foundation. Same with the Apache Software Foundation, all about the mailing list life. So FYI, you can turn that forum into a mailing list, y'all. Don't worry. That's what I do.
Nice.
So check that out. And there is a Swift server category there. And love to have people involved.
Excellent.
Thank you so
sounds
much.
very cool.
Yay, thank you both.
Thank you for coming.
I hope you enjoy KubeCon.
Oh yeah, I think we all are.
I gotta go run give a talk.
I know. So I'm gonna wrap this up.
Yes.
My name's Laura.
My name's Kat.
And I'm Paris.
And we're gonna say bye.
Bye.
Bye.